You're listening to Season 2 of the Meez podcast. I'm your host, Josh Sharkey, the founder and CEO of Meez, a culinary operating system for food professionals. On the show, we're going to talk to high performers in the food business, everything from chefs to CEOs, technologists, writers, investors, and more, about how they innovate and operate and how they consistently execute at a high level, day after day. And I would really love it if you could drop us a 5-star review anywhere that you listen to your podcast. That could be Apple, that could be Spotify, could be Google. I'm not picky. Anywhere works, but I really appreciate the support. And as always, I hope you enjoy the show.
With every stroke of the pencil, I'm giving you folks a glimpse into my experiences you could trace like a stencil.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My guest today, his name's Sam Bernstein. He's the founder of this company called Table22, which essentially is built to help restaurants get incremental new revenue from subscriptions. And that could be like subscriptions of memberships to the restaurant or CPG products or events and things like that. Anyways, I ended up running into Sam and we coordinated doing this podcast at the chef conference in Philly. Had never met him before. And coincidentally, Nick, now we run into each other all the time. I just saw him this past week at the National Restaurant Association show, NRA show. We hosted an event with In Cookware and Fernet, and he dropped by and I was like, hey, good to see you, Sam. Anyways, we got to know each other over the last month or so and really, really love what he's doing. And more importantly, I just think he's a really great entrepreneur, really smart, really cares about what he's building. And I think it's just a really smart approach to helping restaurants generate more revenue. So anyways, the company's called Table22. You can check it out, table22.com. And we chat about how he got started, his background in entrepreneurship. He was a Thiel Fellow. Peter Thiel is a really incredible founder and investor, a thing called the Founders Fund. And it's really hard to get into the fellowship, and Sam did. So we chat about that and him starting a real estate company at a very young age and then pivoting to what Table22 is today. And just generally, how he's building the company and his thoughts on the growth of not just Table22, but the restaurant industry. So as always, I hope that you enjoy the conversation as much as I did. Welcome.
Thanks so much. Good to be here.
Awesome to have you here. I just learned a lot more about you in the last day or so.
Great.
So we're here just for everybody's awareness. We are here live, though this won't be live, at the chef conference in Philly. And Sam was on a panel yesterday, right before me.
That's right. I didn't have the esteemed moderator designation.
Oh, well, it's funny. I've been on a bunch of panels, and I actually think moderating was more nerve-wracking. Maybe just because of the group.
It was quite a group.
Yeah, it was great. Well, anyways, I learned a little bit about your background. Well, I'm not gonna lie, last night. But it's pretty amazing.
We're all busy.
So you were analyst for quite a while, and then a Thiel Fellow. I definitely want to talk to you about Peter Thiel because I'm a fan, at the very least, of some of his methodologies. Maybe there's some things that Forbes 30 under 30, and went to UVA. I don't know if you're from Virginia, but you went to UVA, right?
I grew up in New York City, went to high school in Brooklyn, and I went to college at UVA, lived in Austin, San Francisco for a little bit, and I've been back in New York since 2016.
Wow. So, yeah, well, I was going to ask you maybe just fill in the blanks on your background. It seems like, you have a very young face. I don't know how young, but it seems like you're a pretty young entrepreneur. It's pretty incredible, like how much you've been able to achieve. So
thanks.
I don't need to ask your
Doesn't
age,
always feel that way.
But I'm excited to learn how you started. It's funny, as a chef, I always think about, I started cooking when I was a little tiny, person, and most of my career was cooking. I never once thought about being an entrepreneur or starting a business. It was not a thing for 15, 20 years. And to be honest, I get envious when I'm like, I wish I had just thought of this when I was 20, even though I don't regret it all and love cooking. So I want to hear more about your journey, how that happened, but maybe just a little bit of wind up your background.
Yeah, sure thing. So yeah, as I mentioned, I was born in New York City, grew up there. Both of my parents were entrepreneurs, not in the sort of tech sense that, maybe you and I would think of, but my dad had started an architecture firm. My mom worked in the fashion industry and at different points had her own business. And so I grew up around just kind of a reverence for, starting a business, running a business, and everything that takes. We just celebrated, I think, the 34th anniversary of my dad's business. We have a tradition on April 1st, which is when he incorporated his architecture firm. We get Katz pastrami and have it at our apartment. So a little bit of a mix of food and entrepreneurship really like interwoven in my growing up and my background. So with that, I started working at a pretty young age. And by the time I was through, high school and midway through my time at UVA, I had spent time working in politics. I worked for the Obama campaign and the DNC in 2012. I worked for a couple of different sort of financial institutions. I worked for a boutique investment bank that was looking at tech stuff. And I spent a couple of years while I was in school intermittently working for a firm called Fortress Investment Group. And there was a guy there called Mike Novogratz, who now is known in crypto, but at the time was running the liquid markets and hedge fund strategy there. And
so you got to work with him?
A little bit. I mean, he was just very kind to take me under his wing and like sort of give me some projects and feedback on them and let me just be in this place where there were incredibly smart people and have an opportunity to learn from them and do things that I had no business doing, frankly. But he was very generous with his time with me and, bringing me into the firm, during that period of time where I was still a student and everything. So that was really cool. It just continued to sort of, I don't know, it just fueled my fire in terms of wanting to do something amazing and be around smart people. And so I thought that I frankly was going to go into some either or of finance, politics, or a combination of the two of them. But when I was at the University of Virginia in, I guess it was 2014, I found that the local housing market was just a huge pain point for both the renters and in many cases, many of the properties running in a way that created a lot of complexity and confusion and inefficiency. And just starting from the basic premise of, hey, let's bring all the inventory locally online. Let's give people information and transparency, things like reviews and ratings, and give them an opportunity to also go through the more onerous parts of the process, like applying for an apartment, screening, getting approved, putting down a deposit. Let's put all of these things into a better set of tools and software. So I started that there. It picked up traction. I raised a little bit of money from some angel investors to continue to invest in the business and just grow it. So I actually left UVA of my own volition at the end of 2015. I moved to Austin to get the business kind of up and running and be in a place where I could build and be around other smart people and not be distracted. I actually did that before I received the Thiel Fellowship. So I think a lot of people's association with the Thiel Fellowship is you get it and it's the catalyst for, dropping out and building something. I had already kind of done that, but spent the next really 4.5 years building and scaling that company. It ended up being that Tiger Global was the lead investor. We were working with most of the largest, real estate operators around student housing markets in the country. We helped so many people find and book apartments and really young, disempowered renters going through this process for the first time, give them a better set of kind of tools and information and support to do this. Now, things were sort of moving along. How did we get from there to Table22? Well, in March of 2020, we all know what happened. COVID comes to the US, universities shut down and go to virtual instruction. And so when this happens, it becomes clear to us very quickly that we don't have a good path forward for the business that we had been building. We were a bookings-based business. Bookings went to zero, revenue went to zero, and all of a sudden the entire premise of our company was, in doubt. And this is when they were saying, 4 or 5 years to a vaccine. And so I came to our board pretty quickly and said, candid assessment, we don't have a great path forward here. Open-minded to, what do you guys want to do? And we should try to sell the business or we can wind it down and return cash. And our board came back and sort of said, we think there's a third option and we like you and the management team. And if you've got it in you to take a crack at something else, we'll support you. And so, sadly, we did have to whittle the team down at that time. But, in those early months of the pandemic, we had kind of a mandate from our board to, see if there was something else that we were really excited about and they would support us through that process. Emerged Table22. And I can talk obviously about the origins of that, but that's how, Table22 starts in 2020 and that's how we get there.
Now I have a bunch of questions. We're gonna go all the way back.
Sure.
I'm glad you sort of wound all the way up.
Yeah.
Now I think everything that I'd love to ask you is what happened along that way.
Sure.
And of course, we'll learn more about Table22 as well. First off, you said you're from New York and your father's business has been around for 34 years. Are your parents also from the city?
My dad is from the New York area. He grew up in Long Island. And then my mom is actually from Alabama. So she grew up in Alabama, one of 6 kids in Birmingham and not from a family of significant means, but she developed an early sort of love and a set of abilities around like sewing and making her own clothes. And so ultimately that, became a career in the fashion industry. And she came to the Northeast to go to BU and then ended up at Columbia. And she and my dad met on the subway in New York.
Is she still in the fashion industry?
Yeah. Yeah. She works for an American brand called Tanya Taylor that makes really amazing stuff.
That's great. So you really came up in an entrepreneurial
Absolutely.
world.
I mean, she consulted and had a consulting business for so many brands. And my dad, has two businesses. One of them is an architecture firm. But
what's the other one?
It's a project management business, which is very adjacent. But, my dad worked like every Saturday and Sunday growing up. I mean, he spent amazing amounts of time with us and was they were both incredible parents. But I just watched like that work is not a 9 to 5. That was the thing that I kind of grew up around. And, you have something, you're pushing it forward. That was very much like a governing philosophy.
I love that. I also love seeing the product of what that can make. I'm a father of 2 children, and I think about it all the time. The balance between how much do we spend at work versus with them, and it's for me so much more about the quality of time you spend with your kids when you're there, as opposed to the quantity of time.
Yeah, and I imagine it's a difficult balance. I'm not a parent, but they're going to emulate you, right?
Yeah,
absolutely. And so you want to model the behavior, the aspirationalism, the hard work.
Yes.
At the same time, you don't want that to come at the expense of what you need to give to them to be a good parent.
100%. So you went to UVA in 2015.
I was there a bit earlier. I left in 2015.
Gotcha. Were you working for Mike in sort of this investment VC world before you went to UVA?
They let me intern there the summer before I went to UVA, and then I went back. I did it again. I continued to do stuff while I was in school.
Cool. All right. Well, obviously we have a lot to talk about with Table22, but I'd love to just a little bit about the Thiel Fellowship and how that came about. And for those that don't know, Peter Thiel, he founded PayPal, credible investor, has a founder fund now. Lots of controversy around, the ways in which he thinks, but a deep libertarian, and has an incredible book called 0 to 1, which I love.
Yeah, it's
many
awesome.
premises in there that I'd love to chat about. But an incredible thinker and investor. And he has a thing called the Thiel Fellowship, which is not an easy thing to become a part of. You did. So I'd love to understand, how did that happen, man?
It's maybe a more surprising and anticlimactic story than you would think, but I
met him on a subway.
They reached out to me. I think, this was at a time where they were a couple of years into the Thiel Fellowship. Now I think they've been doing it for, 10 plus years. So they've continued to kind of tweak and refine the model very much in, 0 to 1 fashion. But I think the early model was the thing that many people still associate with it, and which generated a lot of controversy, which was, we're going to find 20 incredible young people. Like the original premise was 20 under 20. We're going to find 20 amazing young people who have not either yet gone to undergrad or haven't graduated from undergrad. And we're going to give them this $100,000 grant, and we are going to basically pay them to drop out of college and see if we can sort of catalyze them building something special. By the time that I joined, I think they had refined the model a little bit, because I think maybe one of the, and I can't speak for them, but my sort of vague understanding is one of the learnings was what makes entrepreneurs successful and special is that they have a self-drive around a particular problem, not just that they're tinkering and stumble into something necessarily. And so I think what they found was, while these people are amazing and so smart, actually we're looking for people who maybe have already made a little bit of progress around something. They've taken some of the steps, they've achieved some of the milestones, and they're so committed to it that maybe they even have already dropped out of their own volition. I was in that camp. I had already left UVA. I was building a company. We had raised maybe our first round of outside funding by that point. And so that's how they learned about me. I mean, we had a press, I think, we had a press announcement around our first round of funding at LoftSmart, which was my first company. And they just reached out and said, do you know about the Thiel Fellowship? Have you considered applying? We see from afar you're doing something interesting and actually dropped out already. We think you might be an interesting fit. And so they basically invited me to apply, and I did. I got into the next round of, interviews, and they flew, I don't know, maybe 60 finalists or something out to San Francisco, from which I think they picked 20 or 22. And everyone did several interviews in person and actually pitched what they were building and did a presentation to the whole group. And that was a fun and totally interesting weekend. And anyways, I ended up, being selected, got a call a couple months later.
It's so interesting because it is true. You don't sort of learn to be an entrepreneur. It's sort of in you or not. I think it's really smart that they're looking for the early indicators. I mean, typically, if you're an entrepreneur, you probably started selling something long before you had a company.
Yeah. My first business, which I neglected to mention, was we went to a place growing up called Fire Island, which is an island off of Long Island.
Yep.
And there's no cars there. And so when people take the ferry over, they have bags. And so there's like all the teenagers have a wagon, and you get paid to do wagon hauls of people's luggage to their house. And so that was actually my first,
Nice.
micro small business. But yeah.
That's awesome. So what did you learn from the Thiel Fellowship, or what did you gain, or what were sort of the resources that you were able to leverage from it?
I think the main thing, it's actually a fairly hands-off program in the same way that, like, Y Combinator, like you're not, I didn't do YC, but you're not working out of YC every day. I think the main thing that both the Thiel Fellowship and YC do very well is they put a bunch of smart people in a room. They give you access to resources and experts that maybe you wouldn't have otherwise had access to. And then there's just some great programming and events where, good collisions and learning can happen. But otherwise, I mean, it's a stamp of credibility that helps you in all of your other, endeavors and like things like fundraising. And so it's a nice marker or badge and a great community to be a part of. They were not mega hands-on in terms of the like building of the business.
Did they take equity?
No, it's a grant.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's great. Cool. So fast forward, you built this really incredible real estate company. It sounds like you didn't necessarily exit. You pivoted to a completely different business model.
That's right.
A pandemic hit. So let's talk about how you got into this restaurant space, which is very different from real estate, and how Table22 kind of became what it is.
Yeah, of course. So, I mean, a couple of things. The first is I had spent the years that I was in New York from 2016 on, even while I was building LoftSmart, becoming really, I'm a lifelong lover of food and restaurants and just a reverence for them. But I had spent those years where I now had a little bit of disposable income. Just as much as I could be in restaurants, I wanted to be in restaurants. I found it the place of the greatest joy that like one could experience is a great meal with friends in a place that's doing something special, that's creating a unique environment, that's transportative. The food is amazing, the service, the relationships that you can develop with the team there. And through that process, I became really a regular at a couple of places, and like Capital R regular, going a lot, first name basis, dap up the folks on the team when you come in and, have a chance.
What were those spots?
One, the really the main one that comes to mind is Pasquale Jones, which I lived around the corner from in New York City. And when it opened in 2015 or 16 was like just totally dismantled, I think, a bunch of ideas about what fine dining was. And it was loud rap music and like incredible care of the ingredients, but in a more casual, it's a lot of things that now feel common, but I think they were at the forefront like of a lot of that, and unbelievable wine program paired with a pizza from an incredible, like it just, now you see that a lot. But I think at the time it like sort of hit New York in an interesting way. And they had a sister restaurant, Charlie Bird, which also had an incredible amount of love and acclaim and still does. And I was just going to both of those spots a lot, and they were taking incredible care of me. And in return, I was, really kind of bringing people in. I would have business dinners there. I would like bring customers and clients there. I'd bring friends, dates, right? And I saw that there's this economic engine between regulars and restaurants, and what an important sort of business pillar that is for the success and longevity of restaurants, that you have these very, very high frequency and commitment segment of customers that make a big impact on the business. And then I saw on the consumer side, wow, what a magical, experience that unlocks to be part of that community, that group. And so when we were embarking on the process of starting a new business, the thing that became Table22, I knew I wanted to do something in the hospitality area, even as we evaluated certain options in other places. B, I had this idea in my mind that this notion of helping restaurants drive more of that kind of regular dynamic and behavior and finding other ways to capture spend and monetization from those guests could be a really impactful thing. Third, we're at the beginning of the pandemic, and it feels like, wow, we're in a sea change moment for how restaurants are going to think about interacting with their guests, capturing spend and dollars from them, and having a more diversified business, beyond just on-premise dining. Our view was the pandemic will end at some point, and we want to build something that's helpful both during the pandemic, but has legs and longevity even beyond that. So after spending time with really thousands of restaurants around the country, we came to this view that if we could help the hospitality industry have tools to engage their best and most loyal guests, generate predictable, high margin revenue from them, and expand the kind of brand and product experience beyond the four physical walls of the restaurant, that would be a winning model. That would be something that would persist beyond COVID. And that is what we've seen. It helped a lot of restaurants a lot during COVID. We're really proud of that. But the business is significantly bigger now than it was during COVID. And it's continued to grow. And I think we're seeing the thesis play out to some extent.
Yeah.
So that's exciting.
It's awesome. Yeah, I mean, I think one thing that the pandemic did that I love to see was, pay off this notion that you can expand horizontally and not always need to have this vertical expansion of like more four-wall boxes of restaurants. You can add on catering, CPG, subscription, all these kinds of things, and
absolutely.
Still have upward mobility for your team, still have incrementally new revenue without having to open up another of your boxes. I mean, Charlie Bird and Pasquale Jones is a great example of, JetBlue, Mint. They're so, I don't know what the economic model is there, but
I'm sure it rocks. No, and I think that evidence is like one of the points that we believed, which was we heard from a lot of restaurants, like, and particularly the ones that are busy and doing well and have created something special, you're leaving a lot of money on the table every night. There's just only so many seats, right? And so restaurants are looking at this unmet demand for what they do, and they're thinking, I've got two ways to monetize this. I can go on, the delivery apps, and I can lose control of the customer relationship, and I can pay very high fees, and I don't totally control the experience. Or I can spend, $3 million to go open another box. I don't know whatever the number is, but in New York City, it can be that much. And we just felt like those were two very extreme options that both had complicated propositions. And so we wanted to give them a new mechanism to kind of meet that demand.
So what is it?
Yeah, sure.
Also, maybe just to start, where did the name come from?
It was the table at Pasquale Jones
That's awesome.
Yeah, exactly.
Do they get a couple shares?
We've never worked with them actually, which is too bad. But in any event, I have a great respect and admiration for their team. How does it work? What is it? So the thing that we started with, that we came to market with, very focused product, is the best set of subscription and membership commerce tools for the hospitality industry. And today we work with restaurants, wine shops, butchers, bakeries, farms, all manner of different kind of product-driven, community-driven hospitality businesses. And what we help them to do are really to launch, grow, and manage these subscription offerings for guests that are successful. These are mostly product-driven subscriptions, things like dinner series, supper clubs, wine clubs, farm share, CSA-style boxes, butcher boxes, cheese clubs, all manner of different kind of product-driven subscriptions. And we provide, the e-commerce tools, the shipping and delivery enablement, a lot of support on the marketing and operations. And in return, restaurants get, monthly pre-orders from their members, significant new line of revenue, and they're able to do so in such a way that doesn't disrupt the core service operation, with orders hitting during busy periods and everything. And they can really control what it is that they put out and tell a story. And that seems to be a model that's working really well. And we have more restaurants and hospitality businesses than ever that are generating 6, even 7 figures of revenue using the platform. Yeah. So can be for many restaurants the difference between being, in the red and in the black.
This show is brought to you by, you guessed it, Meez. Meez helps thousands of restaurants and food service businesses all over the world build profitable menus and scale their business successfully. If you're looking to organize your recipe IP and train your team to put out consistent product every day in less time than ever before, then Meez is just for you. And you can transform all those old Google Docs and Word docs and PDFs and spreadsheets and Google Sheets into dynamic, actionable recipes in Meez in lightning speed. Plus, stop all that manual work of processing invoices, because Meez will digitize all your purchases automatically. And there's a built-in database of ingredient yields, prep yields, and unit of measure conversions for every ingredient, which means you're going to get laser-accurate food costs in a fraction of the time. Visit www.getmeez.com. That's GETMEEZ.com to learn more. And check out the show notes moving forward, because we're going to be adding promotions and discount codes so that all of you lovely and brilliant Meez podcast listeners get a sweet deal on Meez. Yeah. Well, I'd love to just learn a little bit more about the actual product itself. I mean, are you leveraging Stripe or like something like a Recurly for the recurring payment thing, or did you build that in house, or like what is the interface that the customers?
Yeah, great question. So Stripe is the processor.
That's typically what you're using.
So they're the payment rails, right? They're the actual gateway. They do the payments processing.
Yeah.
What we've built on top of Stripe is a really sophisticated set of subscription management and billing tools. Now, we work with restaurants or wine shops or whatever all the time that are coming from a Squarespace or a Square or Shopify, using, Recharge or Curly or something, where they have built up a program, but they want more configurability. They want a cleaner UX that's really designed around subscriptions. They want better tools to communicate the guests. They want to offer delivery. All these things, they don't know how to market it and grow it. All these things that our platform addresses. And so it's purpose-built subscription management tools for the hospitality industry with a bunch of layers of actual operations and marketing enablement, and to deliver a richer guest experience. So that's kind of, and of course we use things like Stripe, where we don't have a core competency in, let's say, payments processing.
I apologize if this gets a little technical. I was really curious.
Sure.
The interface is sort of admin facing then, right? For the customer. And then so on the front end, they might be using Bento Box or Squarespace, and then it's plugged into that?
So we build the hosted commerce experiences for the restaurants. So like I just downstairs saw when I was walking in, one of our amazing partners, the chef Fiore Tedesco from Locadoro in Austin.
I just had him on 2 weeks ago.
Oh, awesome.
He's great.
So they do these like beautiful meals and pasta kits and wine pairings through the Table22 platform. They've been with us since pretty like early days of the pandemic. So years now we've worked together, and they've, basically we build them a hosted checkout experience it lives on table22.com, but it's pretty white labeled. So they just link out to it from their site or their Instagram. Consumers buy, then they've got a back end portal where they can manage all of the information that they need about who are their members, who's active, churn, pause, canceled, the different cohorts when they're fulfilling, be able to text and email with guests directly. So they get that sort of robust back end set of tools. And then they have the support of our team helping enable, things like delivery, shipping, pickup, marketing, so on.
It's a lot. It's funny. I was just actually talking to my team about this yesterday. I was like, what are all the things that they're providing? Because we use Recurly for my technology company, and of course we use Stripe on the back end and other things. But of course, we were discovered. Ursula, who works for me, mentioned like, but no restaurant could use that, and it's very specifically built for tech. And it sounds like what you're building is all of these, to your point, these very purpose-built products for not just a recurring subscription of a plan. It sounds like you can do something to be for a membership or for a product or CPG.
Yeah, that's right.
Really anything that you want to, create a subscription for in a restaurant. I love it.
That's absolutely right. And in addition to the core product, which is, subscription and membership tools, we just launched at the end of last year what we call a one-time commerce product, or a la carte commerce. And what that means is the use case that we're starting with is we've got a lot of partners who do really well and do a lot of business selling sort of single event based packages. And I don't mean like in-store, prefix menus or anything like that. That's still mostly handled by whatever their reservation and table management system is. But if they sell a ton of Thanksgiving pies or everything but the turkey, or on Mother's Day, they sell a home brunch kit, or New Year's Eve, they sell a champagne pack, like whatever it might be, that sort of pre-order based, fulfillment oriented, like batch fulfillment oriented commerce use case, we've actually built amazing building blocks around. And so we shipped this one-time commerce product in Q4 of last year. 5% of our partners, our customers, piloted it, and it drove a 20% lift to our business in Q4. And so we're seeing a lot more expansion of that product this year. And I think over time you'll see us be more than just subscriptions and memberships. You're already seeing that, and I think it's really helping them with all the tools they need to identify and monetize their best and most engaged customers.
I love that.
Yeah.
It's so funny now that I'm like hearing you talk. I remember during the pandemic when Blue Hill started selling like their their CSA type things, but it was actually food. And then you had like Attaboy starting to sell all the Korean products, and it was like everyone was doing their own sort of grocery. Absolutely. I don't know how much of that was you, but it was happening a lot. We worked
with many restaurants during the pandemic. David Barber from Blue Hill is actually one of our investors. We didn't get to support those, but
through his venture fund or just independently?
Yes, through his fund. We didn't get to support Blue Hill stuff directly, but basically the way that I've seen a lot of restaurants go is, whether it's like Coats of the world or Attaboy or Blue Hill, like many people had extreme success with this during the pandemic. And then when they were, not forced to reopen, but able to reopen, they were forced to wind down a lot of these sort of non-core lines. Many folks are now getting that stuff back up and running. And we've had conversations with several of the people we just talked about kind of bringing some of this stuff back, because now that they're restaffed, they're stable, they're open, they can sort of contemplate again different ways to grow. And I think like if you look at Square's 2024 Future of Commerce report, and they've got a bunch of amazing, obviously hundreds of thousands of restaurants that use their point of sale and a bunch of great consumer research as well. The number one theme is restaurants wanting and needing to have a multi-hyphenate revenue strategy for their business.
It's a no-brainer. Yeah, I mean, you lease a restaurant, a space, and you do the IRR. Like, okay, over 10 years, okay, here's what I'm going to pay in rent. It's going to increase over 3% every year, and like you can only do so much top line with however many seats you have, no matter how busy you're going to get. And
the best case scenario is you hit a cap.
Yeah, exactly. And that's if you hit that cap. But there's so many opportunities for incremental revenue, and I think that I love that this is happening. You're seeing this opportunity to look at your four walls of a restaurant. It's like, oh, yeah, sure. I have all my customers coming in to eat this experience, but there's a bunch of other ways that I can monetize the thing that I've built.
Yeah.
Side note for everybody, by the way, this is not an advertisement. Sam didn't pay to come on this show. We just happened to be at the conference together, and I saw you building. I thought it was really cool. I wanted to learn more, but
yeah, thanks.
I think we're throwing a lot here, but
I appreciate the acknowledgement of that. We're just meeting, for the first time. So
I understand clearly the subscription piece of it and creating that model where they can have a recurring subscription, but it sounds like you handled the distribution as well.
Yeah.
First of all, why? Like, why did you get into that? That's a whole beast of a problem to solve. And how are you doing it?
I don't think that we ever necessarily wanted to be in the business of like moving things around in the physical world. It's harder, but it's also where the need is from the restaurant principle. Like that's the main driver of why we would make a decision to invest in something or build out a particular operational muscle, is like, do our customers benefit from it, tremendously. And I think in this case, as restaurants were reopening from COVID, they were just like, whoa, our dining room, which has been a fulfillment center for the last, year or however many months, is going to go back to being a restaurant again. And so many of them came to us and said, we would like to continue to do this, but we don't have the space for all the packages, and we can't just have, pickups occurring during service and all the time. Yep. And so our solution to that was, well, we'll help you, get them delivered around town. And so we built up our own network of, basically fleets and drivers that we subcontract with in, now 25 US cities. I think we have this, and it's our own sort of self-managed network of trusted delivery partners, come do batch pickups and deliveries from restaurants when they fulfill, their subscription orders, and can help them clear that inventory out of the physical space and get it in the hands of the guest. And then, as far as shipping is concerned, we do have a number of partners who ship, and we're integrated with all the kind of carriers and can get them good rates and provide prepaid shipping labels through the platform. And so we can even send the FedEx truck to come, pick stuff up.
I mean, it really is the hardest part. I mean, of course, getting somebody to want to buy something and getting them to your website and, pressing the CTA to buy, that's all like, there's work there in marketing, but that's kind of measurable. But then, how do I actually get this stuff to all these people is a real pain. I remember during the pandemic, like, I don't know if you probably remember this, Goldbelly started proliferating a lot more.
Yeah.
Cook Unity and similar companies started, adding these incremental and new revenue streams. But then to your point, after the pandemic, like, oh shit, I have to go back to operating my restaurant every day. And I still have to maintain this because I'm not going to give up this revenue.
Yeah.
Are there parts of how you help them with the actual, packaging and, that whole sort of operation of packaging and shipping stuff out?
Yeah. I mean, I think one of the areas that we have to do a great job, and I think our position to add a lot of value to our restaurant partners, is we've learned a lot. And, we've seen 1,000 restaurants that have launched programs, using our tools. We see what sells, what kind of marketing works. We see, what kind of packaging and experiences consumers respond to favorably and ultimately retain in and continue to spend more on. Mm-hmm. And so we're able to kind of like aggregate all of those learnings. And for each new restaurant that comes on the platform, we are suggesting or offering advice around the most optimized version of what their offering can look like, what the variants are, the pricing. Like, we're bringing that data to the table to kind of help them avoid mistakes that they might otherwise make or just not leave dollars on the table. And I think that extends down to the operations side too. So, let's say you have 100 orders. Well, we're saying, hey, here are the different ways that you can spread that fulfillment out across the different days. Here are the way that other restaurants are packaging. Here's the way that we see consumers, times or days of the week that we see consumers, most interested in picking up or receiving a delivery. So yeah, I would say like from top to bottom, we are trying to bring experience to bear to help them, both succeed operationally, have it be smooth and not disruptive, but also deliver like a really great and convenient guest experience.
It's awesome. I love it. I want to do one more thing on Table 22, and then we're going to do a little founder therapy. Because whenever I have another CEO on, it's always
sure.
good to do that.
Sounds good.
I understand a lot more about what Table 22 is now, but what's the future look like? Are you thinking about sort of like what the next iteration of the product is?
I think we're bringing this really unique mix of what the industry has come to understand as first and third party capabilities. First party being own your customers, harvest your demand, nurture those relationships and have your brand at the forefront. Third party generally having been the connotation of those logistics chops, those operations chops that maybe restaurants don't have as a core capacity in-house. We've tried to kind of put the best of both worlds together on those things. And I think it's a set of capabilities, it's a model, it's an infrastructure that can be applied to almost every single one of the commerce streams that they have, maybe beyond the four walls. And so when I think about, these pre-order, like, one-time commerce use cases, I think we're already achieving a lot, like helping our restaurants achieve a lot more there, beat their previous sales records, sell more Thanksgiving pie, whatever it is. Then there's the subscription and membership stuff. I think every restaurant in America should at least try this and see if they can kind of rally their community behind predictable revenue and great products. And I think that's working. Then there's, their catering, there's gift card, like there's just all the different stuff that they do. And I think, we feel like over time we are building the guest monetization engine for the hospitality industry to really help them take back power, identify the different moments and use cases and sort of spend pockets that they can capture from their guests, whether it's their home cooking and dining, their grocery shopping, retail, their wine buying. Like restaurants can serve all of these use cases for their most sort of engaged guest segment, and we can help them do the hard parts of that.
Yeah. You probably have gotten this question from investors. I don't know, from restaurants, but you have a two-sided marketplace. Is there some point where you're going to build an actual marketplace of where there's discoverability of all the restaurants?
So I don't know that I would consider our business a marketplace today. We principally engage with the restaurant, and then they use our tools to sell things to their guests, right? So we help them with the marketing piece, but the main reason they sign up to work with us is not to access a consumer network. So just to lay out like how I see that, I do think that what that makes us is a B2B2C business. We go B2B, we give them tools, then they sell B2C using our tools. However, over time, we have cultivated a, guest following and network in a number of our cities. And we have been able to use that to like people who sign up for our newsletter and who are following along on Instagram, whatever. And we have been able to use that to, I think of it like a cherry on top. We've been able to use that to add additional exposure and demand to our restaurant partners. And I think they're seeing a lot of value from that. It's one of the reasons I think they're switching a lot of their one-time packages, which maybe they've sold through Toast or Talk in the past over to Table 22, is that, we're driving a 20% lift to sales from our local network in the city. Yeah.
I have to imagine though, at some point there's enough inertia with enough restaurants you're working with where you can sort of optimize for discoverability, right? Where like you have enough of these restaurants that are offering these things where if there was and I'm not selling you on your
sure.
If you went to Table 22 and I could find Fiore's, sauce there.
Sure,
I didn't even know who he was.
Yeah. I definitely wouldn't rule that out in the future.
Yeah. All right. Well, on that note, you started previous company, now this company. I'd love to understand, just because I think about this a lot. As you know, like being a founder, it's just stress with more stress. And over time, I think you're young, but I have to imagine you already like experienced so much of this, is that you have to sort of take the highs and the lows together, because there's both of them.
Yeah. Go mad if you don't.
Yeah. Don't get too excited when it's really going well, and don't get too upset when it's not going well. Are there things you do to manage stress?
I think some of it is just your set of personality dispositions, but I've also been through enough cycles where, to your point, when you start out, the highs are here and the lows are here. And then over time, just the band kind of gets narrower in terms of your emotional volatility. So even when I get bad news today, I mean, it affects me. I want to solve a problem, but I don't let it, I got to keep moving on to the next, And so I think that's just part of, getting cycles and experience. And I'm sure you've been on the same journey because you have some great days and some very bad ones. I think, the other thing for me is I don't know that I have any specific mechanics like meditation or whatever. And I'm probably behind on a lot of that, but I have good centers of joy in other areas of my life. Like I have an amazing, partner, fiance. I have a great family that I love. I have amazing friends who I, make time to see. And so between those things and other personal interests, I get out and try to play tennis a couple of times a week or, get in nature, take a walk or a hike from time to time.
You live in the city?
I live in the city, so it's not the best place for either of those things, but you can find it if you try. And then I think, honestly, I just still get a lot of joy from the work. I mean, that's really if you're not enjoying the work, everything else is screwed. And you got to be passionate about the problem that you're working on. You got to enjoy working with your team. We have a no assholes rule, inside the company. So we just try to all enjoy working with one another and be motivated around solving the same problem and getting to the same end state. And then, part of my job is I get to spend time with these amazing restaurants. I get to go to different cities where we have customers and are bringing on new customers and, see some of the best of what the US has to offer culinarily. And I got to be grateful for that. That's pretty good.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you have to find something that brings you a lot of joy from the work, which I totally agree. I mean, it's funny. Cooking is something I have loved more than anything my whole life, other than my kids. But now, I would have never imagined having a tech company. I fucking love it. I just love seeing chefs, resonate with the product. I'm sure it's the same way that you love
when the product works. There's no better feeling. I mean, when you have done the hard work to create something that someone gets a return or some value from, and that someone, you care about them and their world and helping them.
Yeah.
What could be better?
But part of, it really is part of being an owner is you do, I don't know what you think about this. You do sort of develop a bit of this numbness to, and sometimes something really good will happen. And I'll respond similarly to how when something bad happens to my team is wait, hey, this is awesome. And
Amp it up.
Yes, this is great, Yeah. And there will be tomorrow.
Yeah.
And it's tough because you have to have that balance of really appreciating things, but also, having that stoic sort of,
got to celebrate the wins. It's important for your team to see you celebrate the wins. But I forget who said it. Common trope, right? Things are never as good as they seem or as bad as they seem.
Mm-hmm.
A different way of saying that is I think, when Amazon went public and they had this period of tremendous volatility, early on in the business, Jeff Bezos, I think, got up and said, when the stock goes up 30%, we're not 30% better as a company.
Yeah.
When the stock goes down 30%, we're not 30% worse as a company. We're not the stock price. We're not this day's events. Let's not miss the forest for the trees.
It all comes down to just continuing to have a really deep confidence in the vision of what you're building. Because on any given day, it's very easy to get discouraged when something doesn't go well. But as long as you really truly believe the thing that you're building is meaningful and is going to have an impact, for me, that's the best way to get through all the hard times.
For sure.
I am curious though, if you have, you've been doing this a while. It sounds like you've surrounded yourself with, with some really smart people. I did want to ask you about Adam Fishman and what he means to you.
Oh, sure. Yeah. So, Adam Fishman and I have been working together for a couple of years. He's on the board of Table22. I invited him to join and basically sit in an independent type of seat. I just, started working with him in an advisory capacity. We had been connected by another of our board members. For background,
could you maybe just share with you?
Yeah, for background. So he was the head of growth at Lyft, and then he was the VP of product and growth at Patreon, which is in many ways analogous to our business. Subscriptions to creators. It's similar at the business model level, and he ran product and growth there. And then he was the chief product and growth officer, I think, at Imperfect Foods, which later sold to Misfits or merged with the Misfits market. Mm-hmm. And now he's just been doing some kind of consulting and advising and some interim gigs here and there. But, if you think about our business, it's kind of as if Patreon and Imperfect Foods like had a baby. And so it's rare that you meet someone whose career experience is so recent, so practical, and so applicable.
100%. And Lyft, to be honest with you, because Lyft is like helping,
at some level as well, right? And then the logistics piece, right, of Lyft. And so there's just so many elements of what he's learned along the way that I've found really, really, really helpful. And at a certain point of working together for, 6, 9, 12 months in an advisory capacity, I just asked him to join the board and he did. And he's been a super, super valuable resource. And I know he's doing his own podcast thing, which is,
cool.
He's got some great guests on. It's just folks in tech and product and particularly some ideas around like fatherhood. And
nice.
So anyways,
awesome.
He's an interesting guy.
Yeah, we have this, one of my investors, angel investors, guy, Lenny Richitsky.
Yeah, he and Lenny are tight.
Yeah, I know. Actually, the original idea when I was like, I should do a podcast, Lenny was like, do a podcast.
Cool.
All right, so I'm curious I don't know if you ever think about this. I actually don't think about it as much anymore, but I ask it a lot. So I don't know why I keep asking it, but you have to have, decent amount of capital to build what you're building. But we're still restrained by how much capital we have and how much time, the time horizon it takes to build the thing that you're building. I'm curious if you had unlimited capital, unlimited resources, time was not a constraint, like what would you build with either with Table22 or just in general?
I think the prioritization decisions that we have to make today are obviously driven by constraints. And so on any given day we make, or quarter or something, because that's probably more the horizon on which we're making these kinds of decisions. Like any given quarter, we're making the choice between, do we continue to invest in making some part of the current core product better? Do we build something that's more exploratory, like start to build a catering pilot? Like, there are all these sort of questions you have to ask. And, when you're constrained, who knows what the right answer is, but those are the kinds of decisions you make. And so if we had all the capital in the world, I think the two things that I would immediately turn around and do tomorrow would be, one, I would really scale up the core go-to-market engine, which is really an outbound sales and biz dev team reaching out to restaurants, helping them learn more about our product, sign up, whatever. So we'd, have 7 sales reps today. Like I'd like to have a lot more, and that would help us grow the business more quickly, reach more restaurants, et cetera. The second part of the go-to-market motion I would continue to invest more behind is what I would kind of nebulously call brand stuff. So, being at conferences like the Chef Conference, being present at all major events, and we're at some, but not all, doing things that are more in the sort of brand universe, which we've been lighter on because we probably over bias as a team towards things which have a demonstrable ROI, and that may be short-sighted, but that's the second area. And then the third would be, I wish we had more engineers and we could just build all the elements of the kind of all-in-one platform that I talked about, these different commerce streams, continue to automate some of the functions around logistics enablement, guest communicate, like all these things that I wish we could do. So
yeah.
What about you?
I totally agree. We end up having to make these sort of parsimonious decisions because of these constraints. But it's funny, I ask this question a lot, and then after the show, I end up having this conversation. So I'm going to try to just have this conversation now because, and I've mentioned it a couple of times, but are you familiar with the Brian Chesky's 11-star experience from Airbnb?
Yeah.
I do this often. I did it before we built Meez, and I still do it because it actually drives our product roadmap. Because we tend to have this sort of, in my opinion, somewhat myopic like views of like what to do next when we think pragmatically, like, oh yeah, this isn't a natural extension to my business, but what if, of course, in the Airbnb reference, like you are brought via private jet to your destination and Elon Musk shows up with, an electric car if you want that, and there's a parade with elephants taking you there, and they have like I think about it a lot with what we're building, and it actually builds our roadmap. And what ends up usually happening is we get a version of it. And Peter Thiel actually talks about this a lot, by the way, of like, okay, you're saying this will take 6 years to build. What would it look like to build in 6 months? And oftentimes we end up like finding this really interesting middle ground that gets you closer, where you can have something, a product live or something. For us, things like, just tell me how to make more money on my menu, and like, you have all my stuff. Can you just tell me how I can make more profit? And we do that now. And it's not quite the version that I would have envisioned, but it's there. And I think for us, like future things are take all of my culinary IP, help me tell a story, and dynamically create a cookbook that I can distribute to my entire audience and abroad. And I want to make money off these beautiful things that I'm building and interact with my audience. And we'll build that as well. And, I want to, have a marketplace that I can go to. And anyways, there's a number of these things that I think about for my company, but generally speaking, maybe we could do this exercise of course, you want to, spend more on sales and marketing. You want to ramp up your engineers. But if you've built this for a reason, right? You've created this whole new incremental revenue stream for these customers. What would that 11-star thing be like for Table22?
Wow, you really put me on the spot.
I know. And take a second if you want. But and by the way, if you can't think of it, when this is over, go home, think about it, and then shoot me a note and I'll do it in a recap. But
I think the dream for restaurants is that more of this stuff could feel easy and more of it could run more on autopilot. I think, in a food business, it's often the case that there are some economies of scale, but broadly speaking, after your fixed costs, like to make more money, you put in a linear amount of additional like labor and inputs like ingredients and so on. And so when I think about kind of like what the dream would be for restaurants, it would be this idea that we talked about, right? A guest monetization engine. So people are coming in the restaurant, we're collecting, that's where it all begins. You deliver a great experience there. And then all these other ways of monetizing, packages, catering, subscriptions, memberships, whatever, I think they all emanate from the well of customer love and loyalty and trust that you've established inside those four walls.
Yeah.
That's not going to go away. And I'm not a huge believer in the ghost kitchen model. Like, I think what makes independent restaurants special is what you initially experience and the relationship that you begin to cultivate.
100% agree.
What would be the automated and easy component of that would be, well, those systems are collecting guest information. They are building a profile and a set of characteristics about that guest, and then helping you formulate what are the products to sell to them, triggering automated marketing events to sell them so you don't have to like push the product as much. Like, as an example, you go into a restaurant, they see that you have a pattern of a certain kind of wine buying. Well, we're going to send you a really tasteful, sort of personalized note inviting you to join our wine club and talking about how your preferences map to the kinds of things that we're really featuring and exploring in the wine club.
Yeah.
Today, a lot of that is more manually done. And I think that, for restaurants, if a lot of that were running on autopilot, like you have a unit of a guest, they come in, but then there's XYZ ways that we can monetize them almost passively in the background.
100%,
like that would be incredible. And then at some point, someone still has to cook the food or select the wines or whatever. In an 11-star experience, maybe they've got a whole dedicated team to that in an offsite space. And, that can be done in a way that's feels easier or something. But yeah, and then for the consumer, the 11-star experience is the restaurant knows me, they recognize me, they give me these amazing kind of rich ways to experience them even when I'm home. Like I can have the deliciousness of the food from Kefico in San Francisco, or I can have the wine curation of the Four Horsemen in New York. And like I can elevate my home cooking and dining from my favorite places while also supporting them and feeling a connection to them. Yeah. That's the sort of like philosophical thing, I think, on both sides.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, first of all, I totally agree. Like brand equity is really everything, right? And that's why the ghost kitchen model gets more difficult. There are times when it works, but it's far more dependent on execution and discoverability. But just it's like spitballing this, if I'm sitting at a restaurant, and this often happens, like, okay, I sit down and let's just say that this is a restaurant that I have a subscription to via Table22. So maybe that means that I have this experience when I'm in the restaurant, but then the extension of what they do can come to my home. I sit down, I have a dinner, and I'm having this amazing bottle of Cremant d'Alsace, and they brought this cultured butter, and there was this really incredible salsa verde. But then we had this whole meal, right? And I just let them know a couple things. Oh, I love that bottle, and that salsa verde was good. And then, you know what? At my house, I have a case of the Cremant d'Alsace, and once a week I get salsa verde with a recipe of like, here's other things you can do with it. Because the experience is what you pay for at a restaurant. You're going to have a whole meal. You're going to have a bunch of stuff curated for you. So you're not going to go remake that at home. But if you want to sort of get the benefit of all the things that this restaurant has built into that experience and then have some of it at home.
Absolutely. And, like I subscribe to one of our partners, and their sort of market box pasta kit stuff is a place that I just mentioned in San Francisco called Kefico. And yes, there's like a little part of the box that's a pasta kit and a sauce and, a way to sort of make a beautiful meal. But also part of it is like just some of their selected favorite products. It might be their favorite capers or olive oil or whatever it might be. And I find myself just in my daily home cooking feeling like I'm cooking with hand-picked products from some of my favorite places, like that's pretty awesome. And it's a small daily drip of elevating my experience
100%.
from that place. So
I love that. This was awesome.
yeah.
There's a bunch more questions I could ask, but I think in the interest of, we had a good hour here. I'm glad we did this.
Yeah, likewise. Thanks so much for reaching out and making it happen.
Yeah, well, I'm glad we were both here. So anyways, great to meet you.
Yeah, likewise.
And I'm looking forward to learning more about what you're doing. So cheers.
Cool. Thanks so much.
Thanks for tuning into the Meez podcast. The music from the show is a remix of the song Art Mirror by an old friend, hip-hop artist, Fresh Daily. For show notes and more, visit getmeez.com/podcast. That's GETMEEZ.com/podcast. If you enjoyed the show, I'd love it if you can share it with fellow entrepreneurs and culinary pros, and give us a 5-star rating wherever you listen to your podcasts. Keep innovating, don't settle, make today a little bit better than yesterday, and remember, it's impossible for us to learn what we think we already know. See you next time.